We're saying hello to the best part in the MLS season, the playoffs, and bye to Lionel Messi. A new year does mean a new MLS Cup playoff format, and if you need the zero brain cells, kind of like myself, simplest explanation for it, I got you covered, so make sure to go check out this short, because that's what we do on this channel. Now that we got that all sorted, we are all way smarter than the MLS Extra Time pundits. Let's run through these playoff predictions. That disclaimer, I will be 100% right. The first matchup is the New York Red Bulls versus Charlotte FC. How Charlotte made it to the MLS postseason? I don't know. Oh wait, or maybe I do know. Could be thanks to Kalina and, you know, the new MLS Cup playoff format that just welcomes anybody to come join every MLS team in the postseason. The Red Bulls made the postseason by the skin of their teeth thanks to a late Tolkien's penalty that all New York Red Bulls fans can give a massive shout out to Godoy, but then again, probably Godoy should not be walking anywhere near Montreal because Montreal fans probably hate him now. This will be Charlotte FC's first ever appearance in the MLS Cup playoffs, while the New York Red Bulls hold the longest streak in sports history currently of making the playoffs for 14 consecutive seasons. So I'm gonna go with experience over the new kids on the block, plus the Red Bulls will be at home, and I'm gonna say that they're gonna win this one. Next up is Sporting Kansas City versus the San Jose Earthquakes. This is gonna be probably my biggest hot take of the whole video, but I think one of these two teams could be the dark horses in the Western Conference. And before I get this prediction completely wrong, and all of you guys are gonna be commenting in the comments of this video after San Jose and Sporting Kansas City get first rounded, but other than that, I do think this matchup is gonna be really good. Sporting Kansas City, they've been on a tear before making it into the playoffs because most of us fans probably didn't even think Sporting Kansas City were gonna make it to the postseason. It took them about 2 months to get their first win this season, but ever since then, they haven't looked back, and shout out to the Sounders because they basically revived their season helping Sporting Kansas City get their first ever win. And then for the San Jose Earthquakes, they've been a little bit of a sleeper team this season. I mean, they haven't made massive headlines, but then again, they haven't been horrendously horrible, but they've just been okay. Jeremy Abobasi has been absolutely class for the San Jose Earthquakes, and if they want to win this fixture, it's gonna kind of come down to him and Christian Espinoza. These two teams did face off in the 2020 MLS Cup playoffs, which was, my goodness, one of the best playoff matches in MLS history, where it ended 3-3 after the 120 minutes, went to a penalty shootout, and Tim Melia absolutely crushed any San Jose fans' hopes and dreams in that match, saving all of their penalties in the shootout. And I think that's gonna happen again. I think this match will go to a penalty shootout. I doubt there's gonna be 6 goals in this game, but it will go to a PK shootout, and Tim Melia is gonna be the hero to send Sporting Kansas City through to the round 1. Now moving on to round 1, I'm gonna start with the Western Conference side of the bracket, and that's gonna mean St. Louis City SC is gonna face off against Sporting Kansas City. It's gonna be an absolute madness to have this rivalry match in St. Louis City's first ever season in MLS in a playoff match. And in the regular season matches between the two teams, St. Louis City had put up 4 goals in 2 of those matches. But it's not really a good look for Sporting Kansas City, but they did get 1 win sandwiched in the middle of those 3 matches. But I think, unlike the regular season, Sporting Kansas City are gonna do it in the playoffs. I want to take you all down MLS history lane where we've seen the new kids on the block, the new expansion teams like LAFC, Atlanta United, and in this case, St. Louis City, have impeccable first seasons, breaking records, attendance records, goals scored, superstars made from those teams, but then have their first ever playoff matches and just crumble. Atlanta United did it, LAFC did it, and in this case, I think St. Louis City are gonna do it as well. I've doubted St. Louis City before with my regular season predictions that we're just not gonna talk about, and hey, I could be wrong again, but in this case, I don't think I will be wrong. Wait. Hold up 1 second. If you love MLS, you're watching this video, and you're just not subscribed, why are you not subscribed to the channel? Subscribe right now before you forget, because we have lots of MLS content on this channel. From predictions to talking about some of the biggest storylines in MLS, to doing watch-alongs for some of the biggest matchups in the league. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of it. So do it now before you forget. All right. Let's get back to the predictions. Next up, that in my opinion is the best playoff match, which is the Houston Dynamo versus Real Salt Lake. If both of these teams didn't face off against each other in the first round of the playoffs, I think both of these teams could have made a deep run in the tournament. RSL have been a completely different team since they signed Chicho Arango midway through the season. I know they've had a little bit of a blimp near the end. They kind of did hobble over the line to get into the playoffs, while the Houston Dynamo have been a revelation under Ben Olsen. They've only lost like 2 games from like their last 20, which sandwiched in winning the US Open Cup against Inter Miami. Granted, Messi didn't play, but I still think the Houston Dynamo would have won that match if he did play. These two teams, which before going into the playoffs were my favorites from the Western Conference to win the MLS Cup, in this situation, situation, I'm gonna go with the Houston Dynamo. The next up is LAFC versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. You gotta just feel so bad for the Vancouver Whitecaps and their fans because they're always playing LAFC in cup competitions. We saw it earlier on in the season in the CCL where Dennis Bouanga basically made the Vancouver Whitecaps his bitch. They played on MLS Decision Day, which pretty much for both teams the games didn't really matter, and Ryan Gold somehow missed 2 penalties in one match, which were his first ever penalty misses for the team. I think it's kind of written in the stars. I'm sorry, Vancouver. I want to see Cascadia do well, but LAFC is probably going to wipe the floor against them. Then for the final round 1 match in the Western Conference, we have the Seattle Sounders versus FC Dallas. This matchup has so much history in the MLS Cup playoffs. These two teams have faced off 5 times previously, which have been some of the best playoff matches in MLS history, where surprisingly FC Dallas only won 1 of those, which that game, I mean, as a Sounders fan, still hurts me to this day. And I think just like in those previous MLS Cup playoff matches between the two teams, it's going to be really close. It's going to be tight margins. It's only going to be a 1-goal difference. Both of these teams have had great defensive records, but have struggled with individual players offensively, as goals are just not a commonality for both teams. They don't know where the goals will come from. Will it be from Alan Velasco? Will it be from Jordan Morris? Will it be from Liao Chu? Will it be from Paul Arriola? I mean, at this point, throw my name in the hat because all these guys are so madly inconsistent for both teams. But I think all in all, the Sounders have the edge. They have the experience. I'm going to go with it because this FC Dallas team is really young. But then again, we have heard this story once upon a time back in 2015 when a very experienced Seattle Sounders faced off a young, talented FC Dallas team, and the less said, the better, and I don't want to think about that game because to this day, I'm still having therapy sessions talking about it to get over it. Moving on to the Eastern Conference, we have FC Cincinnati versus the New York Red Bulls. I mean, I'm just going to keep this one short and sweet. The New York Red Bulls in the playoffs, they pretty much always just make the first round and then kind of go out. So FC Cincinnati, I think this might be a cakewalk for them. You guys are probably going to be going through. The next up is the matchup that should be called the derby of the biggest choker team in MLS, the Philadelphia Union versus the New England Revolution. I mean, both of these teams are the biggest chokes in the big games in MLS, the Philadelphia Union, the New England Revolution, and luckily for both of them, they both can't choke and lose this game. For the New England Revolution, their hopes and dreams lie on Heel and Bo, who have been absolutely amazing for the most part this season, more so Heel than Bo, but still, I mean, he came up big for them on Decision Day. Then for the Philadelphia Union, after choking MLS Cup final last year, I do think they want to at least make somewhat of a run to at least try to redeem themselves, make it up to their fans for the absolute chokery moment they had against LAFC. And I do think with the help of Gazdag and Carranza, they will do the business in Philadelphia and advance in this match. Up next is the Columbus Crew versus Atlanta United. You know how I said the Dynamo versus Salt Lake game is probably my favorite playoff matchup? This one is pretty tasty as well and is most definitely my favorite matchup in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you got guys like Yaku Marquez, Cucho Hernandez, Diego Rossi, and Thiago Wait, the Columbus Crew for me are my favorites to win this year's MLS Cup. I said it during the middle of this season, and I'm gonna stick with it right now. And with Atlanta United not having Thiago Almada in game 1, I think it's gonna hurt them a lot. Then for the final round 1 matchup, we have Orlando City versus Nashville SC. I need to have a talk with Nashville SC because without Hani Mukhtar, this team is completely useless. And I think in these recent performances leading up to the postseason, Nashville SC are just getting exposed for the team that is just mid without Hani Mukhtar. When Hani Mukhtar doesn't perform, this team doesn't play well. And I think Hani will come up in one of the games for them, but coming up in all 3 games for them, I think is just too much for any human or Hani Mukhtar human you can ask for. And I think Orlando City, they'll probably just do the business and advance from this one. Then moving back to the Western Conference for the quarterfinals, I have the Houston Dynamo versus Sporting Kansas City. If Sporting Kansas City make it to this point in the playoffs, I think Kevincho and every single Sporting Kansas City fan would be over the moon and thanking the soccer gods for somehow, how do we go from a team that didn't have a win after 2 months in MLS to being a quarterfinals in the MLS Cup playoffs? It would be huge for this team, but I think that's as good as it's gonna get. Houston Dynamo have been on an absolute tear. I mean, I've already said it before, Ben Olsen, my goodness, he could raise a kid and he's gonna be the next big superstar in MLS because he has turned this team's fortunes around completely. The Houston Dynamo midfield would absolutely run riot on Sporting Kansas City, so gonna say it, the Houston Dynamo, you're gonna be booking your tickets to the semi-final. The next would be the Seattle Sounders versus LAFC. Seattle and LAFC, one of the most classic playoff matches, which we all remember, the one in 2019 where LAFC were the record-breaking holders, most points in a single season. They were bound to be going to an MLS Cup final. final, hosting it in California. And Seattle went, spoiled the party, and went on to win MLS Cup. Sadly, I just don't think that's gonna happen again. I would love to see the Seattle Sounders run it back, beat LAFC in the playoffs, but I think LAFC is a much more experienced team. It's a little bit more of a bloody team for the fact they lost the CCL final this season, where Sounders fans, which include me, were kind of rubbing it in LAFC fans' faces. You know what?
Winning the CCL isn't for everybody and all that good stuff.
And with numerous big game performances in Seattle, which include kind of Seattle not being a great home team this season, I think LAFC might be booking their ticket to the semifinal. Then moving back to the Eastern Conference for the first quarterfinal match, we have FC Cincinnati versus the Philadelphia Union. This one's kind of a tough one for me because I do believe in like the first place curse, the Supporter Shield winners curse, which I know LAFC, they broke it last season. They won the Supporter Shield, won MLS Cup, but I honestly still believe in it for the most part. I think last season was kind of just an outlier, and I do think if you win the Supporter Shield, you're cursed. And I think in this case, FC Cincinnati, you guys are kind of cursed in this situation. But since you're playing against one of the biggest choke jobs in MLS history, and I know New England Revolution fans, you guys have entered the chat, I think for how well FC Cincinnati have been playing this season, I think they'll have at least this match in the bag. But we'll see what my predictions will be looking for them after this point. Then for the final quarterfinal match, we have the Columbus Crew against Orlando City. Oscar Pareja versus Wilfred Nancy, an absolute Titans clash of managers, a Titans clash of teams, but all in all, Columbus, I'm on the bandwagon. I'm gonna stick with them. I know it's not much insight. I know Orlando fans, you're not gonna be happy to hear this, and you're probably not gonna like my prediction, but I'm gonna say it. I think Columbus would beat you guys in this situation. Then for the first semifinal matchup, we have the Houston Dynamo versus LAFC. Now we're down to the final four, where the Houston Dynamo facing off against LAFC. I actually just can't see it not being LAFC winning this match. I know I've praised on about the Houston Dynamo, but I think experience is going to be so big. I mentioned it earlier, LAFC, they're a little bit bloodied from the match against Lyon in the CCL final. They were the previous MLS Cup winners. But for this matchup in particular, I think they want to go to another MLS Cup final, maybe possibly hosted, depending on which team makes it from the East. I think the Houston Dynamo will put up a really good fight, but I think it's just going to be too much for them in a conference final to somehow win in LA. I'm going to say they're going to another MLS Cup final. Then for the other semifinal matchup, we have the Columbus Crew versus FC Cincinnati. All right, now I'm going to finally bring it up, and it's going to happen here. The Supporter Shield curse is going to kick in. FC Cincinnati, you're going to choke it. Columbus Crew, I think you guys are going to go to an MLS Cup final, which would be their first since 2020. And we're not going to talk about the team that they beat in the final. So my MLS Cup final prediction will be LAFC versus the Columbus Crew. If, and hopefully when, this matchup does happen, it is going to be an absolute supreme MLS Cup final. This would mean a third place seed from both conferences would make a final, which I think would be pretty cool to have two higher seeds make it to an MLS Cup final, which is kind of a rarity to see, excluding last season. And if this matchup were to happen, it would be hosted in Columbus, where in their more recent MLS Cup final appearances, they lost to the Portland Timbers in 2015, which why the hell couldn't you guys just do the business then? And then clapped my beloved Seattle Sounders in 2020. But no reason to talk about stats and all this humbo jumbo. The reality is teams just don't go back to back in MLS Cup finals. It's just a norm in MLS, and I don't think it's gonna happen now. I know LAFC proved me wrong last season, but I don't think it's gonna happen in this situation. Columbus Crew, I think they're winning MLS Cup final this season, and I'm probably gonna be right or wrong. We'll just see what happens. So Columbus, for the love of sweet baby Jesus, don't let me down. But boys and girls, my opinion only matters so much. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Which playoff predictions of mine do you agree with, disagree with? Who do you guys think is going to be winning the MLS Cup? If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video next, where I talk about how Lionel Messi led the worst team in MLS to Cup triumph. So boys and girls, I hope you all have a lovely day.